Hello there, interwebs. So we got some surprising news today. Some news I definitely did not expect surrounding the new showrunner of Doctor Who. Namely, that the showrunner of Doctor Who after Chris Chibnall leaves is going to be none other than Russell T Davies. For those of you who don't know, Russell T Davies was the showrunner of Doctor Who previously for series 1 through 4, I believe. Basically, he was the person that helped to reboot Doctor Who and bring it into sort of this new iteration of it, and ran it for several seasons, and was the showrunner for Christopher Eccleston and David Tennant's runs on the show before finally passing it off to Stephen Moffat when Matt Smith came into the series. Now, I have a lot of thoughts about Russell T Davies coming back to Doctor Who. Some of them good, some of them bad, but ultimately I'm kind of like in the middle, being like, I am so befuddled about this news, and I kind of just need to talk out some of my feelings on it. On the one hand, let's talk about the positive things, the things that I'm actually really excited about this news for. First and foremost, like I said in my previous video when we talked about Chris Chibnall leaving Doctor Who, I have not been the biggest fan of Chris Chibnall's run on the show. Don't get me wrong, I don't think Chris Chibnall's a bad writer. I'm not hating on him like certain other channels will do and be like, oh, he's awful and the worst and wokeness and blah, 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 blah. But I just feel that Chris Chibnall's strengths as a writer are not necessarily best fit for Doctor Who. And I think that he is a better fit for more serialized storytelling, which is actually why I'm excited for the upcoming season, his final season of Doctor Who, because it will be a more serialized story, which again, I think plays to his strengths. But overall, I think that what Doctor Who is a sort of anthology adventure show, does not necessarily fit what Chris Chibnall's strengths are as a writer. So, So I've been kind of excited. So, being honest, I was kind of excited to see someone else step into the role of showrunner. With it being Russell T Davies, though, on the one hand, where I'm excited about that is Russell T Davies honestly is probably the showrunner of my favorite series of the show. While I still love certain elements of Stephen Moffat, and certainly I love Peter Capaldi and Matt Smith quite a bit as their doctors, I have a lot more criticisms and issues with Stephen Moffat, especially as I've grown older and I can see some of the flaws and cracks in Stephen Moffat's writing. But Russell T Davies, I go back to his series, and yes, there's certain elements of it that haven't aged well, and there's this huge element of cheese to the whole proceedings that you either love or hate. I particularly like the cheese, but it is an acquired taste in a lot of senses in those early seasons. I mean, farting aliens, what are you going to do? But I think that he really understood giving characters arcs, having really depthful storytelling, really impactful storytelling that actually like really highlights issues and themes and ideas going on today, in a way that really like hit hard and hit home. You could really see that throughout the first 4 seasons of the show. There were just some really impactful episodes. And not to say that seasons from then on didn't, but I think Russell T Davies just did it in such a masterful way that felt very Doctor Who, and very whimsical and fun, and yet also not avoiding talking about those topics and talking about bureaucracy and government and things like that. I think that's like one of his biggest topics, really, is just how government and bureaucracy affects everyday people's lives, and how the slow and inexorable slowness, I guess, and bureaucratic nature of government fits into that. That seems to be a recurring theme in his work, and you can see that he's and so, seeing all that, I'm very excited to have the showrunner of this series that I really, really loved and gave me my favorite Doctor, David Tennant, to come back to the show. Even further, I think also he has grown heavily as an artist over the years. I think you look at something like Years and Years or It's a Sin, and you really feel like Russell T Davies has continued to grow as an artist and find even more of his voice. Even more so, Russell T Davies is a gay man, and not that the first few series of Doctor Who were, shy about showing LGBT issues. They did have a few things here and there. It wasn't like completely not present. It was probably more upfront than other shows at the time, going on at the time, about showing LGBTQ issues. But certainly it was not as open as it could have been, especially with other shows today, really centering LGBTQ voices. So just on that front, I think having Russell T Davies, who is stronger in his writing, more mature in his writing, and more mature in terms of like he has grown as an artist, and also is able to say more things more clearly without the sort of worry of certain amounts of censorship or things like that is exciting. Though, again, I know trans issues will always be, unfortunately, at least at this point, a hot-button issue in the United Kingdom. So hopefully Russell T Davies will be a great ally there, because I know he's been an ally of the trans community in many of his other works, and I hope that continues in Doctor Who, though I know that will probably be a controversial topic, unfortunately, especially in the United Kingdom, especially with the BBC. But that being said, all that stuff has me very, very excited for him as a showrunner, because I really think that he could right the ship, I guess, is what a lot of people are feeling, honestly. Like I said, Chris Chibnall leaving, I think is a good thing for Doctor Who, even though I like Jodie Whittaker and I don't hate Chris Chibnall as a writer. But I feel like this feeling that him coming in is basically BBC saying, like, we want to bring him back in to right the ship after we know what most people consider to be fairly weak seasons of the show. And really, this is like people will get sort of excited and get back into Doctor Who because they see Russell T Davies as someone that they know and trust back in the series. And I think I feel all of that. But let's start to get onto the negative side of this discussion, because I feel like that mentality that the BBC is showing with this hiring of Russell T Davies, of like righting the ship and sort of going back to the era of like Doctor Who that everyone loved and everyone can kind of agree upon, I think is a very dangerous one, and one that could be very worrying for fans of Doctor Who about how the BBC views Doctor Who and what it might mean for Doctor Who going forward. Because I'll be quite honest with you, while I am excited about Russell T Davies coming in, I would have much preferred someone new. I am always someone who would rather have someone take a risk and fail than have the same thing fed to me over and over again. I have seen Davies' Doctor Who. I've seen those 4 seasons, and yes, he's grown as writer, and yes, I'm sure he'll be able to bring something new, but I would have rathered someone bring a completely new vision to what this franchise is, to what Doctor Who can be. For all of its faults and foibles with Chris Chibnall's run, I appreciated that he tried something new and different with it and failed, because now that just shows us, like, oh, this is something that doesn't really work here, but we know that now, and that's what art should be, especially in franchises. I think the most worrying thing a franchise could happen to a franchise is it gets stuck in the past, and this mentality of going back to the past and doing the same things over and over again because the fans like it and the fans want it, those are the exact type of mentalities that nearly killed Star Trek and is what Star Wars is kind of trying to battle its way out of right now. You know, you look back at Star Trek, my favorite franchise, that show, especially when it got towards the end of its run under Rick Berman's issues aside, you look at Voyager, you look at Star Trek Enterprise. I like those shows, but what really started to see this stagnating of the franchise was this limitation of what Star Trek could be. There are so many missed opportunities with both Voyager and Enterprise because, you know, people like Rick Berman and other writers just could not think of other ways Star Trek could be. I mean, Brandon Braga was basically in charge of Star Trek Voyager and Enterprise for a very long time. Rick Berman for almost 20 years. And there's only so much a person can bring to a franchise that's new and fresh. And ultimately it just stops and you start to get limiting in what the franchise could be. Voyager and Enterprise had so many rules that you just miss so much potential with those series. There was so much potential in Enterprise and Voyager that just could not get expressed because people were like, no, the Maquis and the Starfleet crew wouldn't fight each other on Voyager, or you know, Enterprise really, you can't do anything too crazy with that prequel setting. And you started to see towards the end of Enterprise's run, when it actually got to take risks, do something new, when they brought in new people like Manny Koto as showrunner, that it was able to actually be exciting and fresh and new, but by then it was sadly too late, and the show got canceled and nearly killed Star Trek. And for, you know, as contentious as current Star Trek is, I particularly love it, you cannot say that they are not taking risks, they are not doing something different, and I deeply appreciate that with new Star Trek, that it is a series that does something new. And whether you don't like Discovery, you don't like Picard, you don't like Lower Decks, you can't say that they're not trying something new with the franchise, and I find that fresh and interesting. Bold new worlds, new civilizations, that whole stuff. Star Wars is in the same place that I'm worrying Doctor Who is going to go into. I mean, the sequel trilogy, while you know, some people like certain elements of it, I really feel like that whole sequel trilogy was just so embroiled in just trying to recreate the original trilogy, and ultimately was disappointing because of that. The things that worked within Star Wars were when they took risks, when they tried to take something and do something new. It's hard pressed for me to even think of too many because they were really stuck in there. Last Jedi tried some new things, but also didn't, and I think failed and succeeded in different measures because of that. But I think most people found The Last Jedi to be so fascinating, both anger-inducing and uplifting as like an exciting thing, was because that movie tried to do some different things with Star Wars, whereas the J.J. Abrams Star Wars movies did the same exact thing that we had seen before. And so The Last Jedi, for all of its faults, which again, I do not think The Last Jedi is a great movie, I think it tried to do something new, and ultimately could only do so much because of how Disney wanted to press it into still being the same Star Wars mold, but it did try some things, and J.J. Abrams eventually erased those. But again, you look at something like Star Wars The Bad Batch, you look at The Mandalorian, you look at Star Wars Visions, which just came out. I think the things that excite people most about those shows are not the fact that it's doing the same Star Wars thing, even though I think those shows are a little bit over-reliant on previous Star Wars iterations. I think what people are excited about is that the risky things that they're doing, focusing on smaller characters, focusing on the underworld, focusing on different eras of Star Wars that we haven't seen before. And I think that that's what's exciting about those things. So all that being said, looking back at Doctor Who, seeing Russell T Davies come back to Doctor Who is kind of a scary thought, because it's like, well, is this going to be that rut for Doctor Who? Is this going to be the spot where they start to say, oh, Doctor Who's going to have to be this specific thing. It has to be this way, and we're going to try and fix it with Russell T Davies, and he's going to bring it back to the same thing that it was, and fans will be all happy. And that saddens me, because ultimately that means the show stops progressing forward. It stops moving forward. And even though I trust Russell T Davies to be a great writer, I think he is a really great writer, so maybe this is me over-worrying about this fact, but I do think even more worrisomingly, if that's a word I can say, I think what is more worrying, it's not necessarily Russell T Davies, who I think I can trust to tell a good story. What I am more concerned about is that this is the BBC's mentality towards the show. That BBC is sort of looking at Doctor Who as like, oh, it needs to be this thing that it used to be. It needs to be these specific things, and that's all Doctor Who can be. And that can be kind of a death knell. I mean, again, look at Star Wars. Look at what Star Trek ended up being, and almost killing it. Is that there's this idea, this mentality from on high that says this show, this franchise has to be this thing, and it can't take any risks outside of that. And once it starts to do that, then it starts to sting me. It starts to wither on the vine. And again, I think Russell T Davies will do a great job, but who comes after him? What are they going to be told by executives that they can or cannot do? What limitations will Doctor Who have based on that? What limitations will Russell T Davies have based on that, especially since we're going to be going into the 60th anniversary, and I'm sure it wants to celebrate the past, sort of thing. So while I am excited to see Russell T Davies back, because like I said, no doubt I think he will do a great job, I am concerned at the mentality of the show. I am saddened that someone else new will not get to share their vision of Doctor Who, of what Doctor Who can be, to bring something fresh and interesting to it, whether it would work or whether it wouldn't. I'd rather that than seeing the same thing I've already seen before. I can just go back and watch those things. I can go back and watch old Russell T Davies Doctor Who. I would rather see someone new's Doctor Who. I'd rather see someone fresh and different come in and try and say something different with Doctor Who. I think that's more interesting to me. But sadly, we live in an age of nostalgia, and this is apparently what some people think is the best thing, even though I sort of think going back and looking at the same thing is ultimately a fruitless endeavor. It ultimately just leads you to getting a whisper, a gasp of the thing that you enjoyed before, rather than something new. So again, I'm more concerned about the mentality here than Russell T Davies specifically. So that's my thoughts on Russell T Davies coming back as showrunner of Doctor Who. Obviously, I'm very conflicted on it, but we shall see. Maybe I'll ultimately be proven wrong. Maybe I'm worrying over nothing. I am certainly excited for the next season of Doctor Who under Chris Chibnall, and excited to see what Russell T Davies will do for the 60th anniversary. But until then, thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget all the other fun stuff. I have a main channel you can go check out my video essay stuff on. But beyond all of that, I hope that you, as always, live long and stay sexy.